that forward story takes place in 3 days, during a blizzard, a snowstorm, and I did that intentionally so that the place could be kind of isolated and abandoned, so, like, everybody's gone to shelter in their homes, so there's nobody at the rink, nobody on the roads, and so the place is almost, like, frozen in time from when she was there. So she's almost going back to a relic, and that is going to really bring all of these memories sort of out of her, out of hiding where they've been all this time. And so we follow Anna Robbins in the forward story. She's trying to find out what happened to Grace, but she starts to realize that this murder may have something to do with the secrets that she left buried there years ago. And in the backstory, we are seeing those secrets unfold day by day, month by month.
This is Story to Count with Jen Jumba. In conversations with writers, something magical happens, and as readers, we begin to see them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. My hope is through these conversations, when you learn about their craft and them as a person, you'll become like me, fiercely loyal, want to read their current book, entire backlist, any future book, or any book they blurb. And when you see their name, you'll want to support them, not only as incredible storytellers, but also the thoughtful individuals you have come to know. And I'm super excited because my guest today is Wendy Walker. Wendy is the author of the psychological suspense novels, All Is Not Forgotten, Emma in the Night Before, Don't Look for Me, What Remains, American Girl, and the Audible original audio plays Mad Love and The Room Next Door. Her novels have been translated into 23 languages. She has topped bestseller lists both nationally and abroad and has been optioned for both television and film. Wendy holds degrees from Brown University and Georgetown Law School. Prior to her writing career, Wendy trained for competitive figure skating, worked as a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs, and practiced both corporate and family law. She resides in Connecticut, where she raised her 3 sons. Now, I've been fortunate enough to have known Wendy for several years, and I look forward to reading each book she writes as well as each audio play she writes. When I listened to The Room Next Door, I was making a 10-hour drive to Tennessee. The drive flew by, and I kept pausing the audio to voice text her with, "Oh my goodness," or "That was a really cool touch," or "I did not see that coming." We've had a great time catching up this past fall in New Orleans. And Wendy is a gem of a human being, as you will hear during our conversation. We're going to be talking about her most recent book, Blade, which just published this week. So happy Pub Week.
Thank you so much. And thank you for those kind words. It's been such a pleasure knowing you these many years.
I know, time just flies.
Oh my gosh.
Let's talk a little bit about Blade. So I'm reading your intro, right? You have a storied background with practicing law, working as a financial analyst, but right before that came the fact that you were a competitive figure skater and trained at a very high level. Can you talk a little bit about that? What that was like?
So I don't remember a time in my childhood when I wasn't skating. And I don't even remember the sort of escalation from the first time I went on the ice to being completely obsessed with it. It was almost instantaneous. I lived and breathed figure skating, and it completely defined my childhood. But it's as you progress in the sport, unless you're lucky enough to live next to, a facility with a great coach, you can end up driving all over the place, trying to find ice time because the rinks are dividing the ice between hockey and public skating. And hockey really takes up a lot of the time because of games and, the communities. It's a much more popular sport than figure skating. So when I was 13, my family decided to have me try out for an Olympic level coach named Carlo Fossi. He had trained Dorothy Hemmel and Peggy Fleming and
I had the Dorothy Hemmel haircut back when.
And I did. I know. Yes. So he was he trained international skaters from around the world, national champions from around the world. So when he agreed to coach me, I went and lived in a dormitory that was just for skaters at a rink in Colorado Springs. And it was dedicated almost exclusively to figure skating. There were two singles coaches. There were dance coaches and pairs coaches. And skaters came from around the world to train there. So I spent the last 3 years of my skating journey training there, and that was really, for me, such a transition in my life. It was a time when, well, I sort of came of age, I guess you could say, went through puberty, really kind of isolated and living far from home. And I also was seeing this dream of becoming, an Olympic figure skater, making an Olympic team one day, start to fade and eventually die. And the combination of those things was pretty devastating for me emotionally. Uh, those years of my life kind of tainted my entire experience training for figure skating. And so, yeah, it took me 10 novels to finally dive in and get to it.
Yeah, I was so glad you did to share that glimpse of what that training looks like. I mean, I don't think you grew up in Colorado, correct?
No, no, I lived in Connecticut. I still do.
Okay, so that's like across the country at the age of 13, your parents just said, "Okay, here you go," and you're essentially, yeah, kind of living on your own.
Yeah. I mean,
Hard to
it's
imagine.
like, it's kind of, you think about boarding school, like, people send their kids to boarding school at 14, 15. So I think in their minds, like, this would be similar to that. I was a little bit younger than boarding school age, but it's really not. And you're not home for the whole summer. So or long spring breaks and things like that. It's really, that's your kind of your permanent home, but also it's not the same environment as a boarding school. The highly competitive, there are no adults who are specifically allocated as like house parents to look after you, to who are trained, to kind of um help teenagers get through life, and supervision and all of those things. So it was not an ideal place to be emotionally vulnerable and without parental guidance and
Yeah, I
support.
mean, that those years, those teen years are hard enough. And then you complicate it with, boarding school might be similar, but the fact in boarding school you have other things that you're learning and doing, whereas you were singularly focused on skating and skating
Yes.
only. I mean, it became your identity.
Yes, it became my entire identity. Finding a path out of that, which I just wrote an article about this. It was a stroke of luck, really, that my idol, when I was growing up, and around the age that I moved out there, was an Olympic skater who had trained at the same facility. And I ended up living, after I lived in the dorm, I lived for several months with her mother, who had stayed out there, and when she would come home for visits. So I was going through this, really terrible time towards the end of my skating career, I guess you could call it. Her mother could see it, and I think, I don't know what happened between them, if her mother told her what was happening with me, or if she could just see it. But she kind of took me aside on one of her visits home, and kind of said, like, "Is there anything else you're good at?" Or, something to that effect. And there was something about having that message delivered, by her, my idol growing up as a skater, to kind of say, like, there are other things that are just as good as this, like, that you can be proud of. And I was a very good student. And so it was a total mental shift. Like, maybe I can, set my sights on something intellectual. And that's what I did.
Yeah, is there anything else you're good at? I think really did we just listen to your bio? Financial analyst at Goldman Sachs. You went to Brown, went to Georgetown Law School, practiced corporate law, family law. This is what, book number 11, 10.
It's it's the 12th published novel and the 10th thriller. So, yeah, lots of books.
Yeah, so I'd
Well,
say
or chronic overachiever, I don't know.
yeah, there are lots of other things that you're good at, and how special that conversation had to have been to hear from somebody who lived that same thing, because we like to think we know. And this book, Blade, gives a insight into what that must be like, but to have somebody who actually walked in, I was to say your same skates, but yeah, to be able to
Yeah.
kindly and compassionately, you know, help you.
It was a tremendous gift, and she was young at the time. I mean, she was probably 22 maybe, so she was a young woman, um, and it was just a tremendous gift that she gave me, and her mother too, who was very supportive and made me feel valued for, myself as a person and not just how I was performing on the ice. And it was really, really such a gift. And looking back, instrumental, I think, in allowing me to make that pivot and to do so without any sort of remorse about the decision. I've never regretted it. Of all the decisions I've made in my life, leaving skating behind was never one of the ones I've regretted. So yeah, it was a tremendous gift.
I think in life there's a difference between running from and moving towards.
Yes,
And I
yes.
think that what you did wasn't running from skating, but moving towards something else. And there's great sense of agency and empowerment when you're able to do to
Yeah, and absolutely. And it wasn't we it was years of, sort of feeling like I was chasing a replacement dream for that. And I think wasn't until I was in law school and having to make a choice about where to work, and I was in a relationship with my future husband, and my mid 20s, and really I finally made a decision at that point that I had finally done enough. I'd achieved enough that I could think about my life more holistically. And what I really was craving then was to create a family. And so I stepped away from the law and what might have been a bigger legal career, and was a stay home mom for 14 years, writing as well, but primarily a stay home mom to my kids. And that, so it had to play out a little bit, and years of therapy when I was a young mom, and it was hard to be not on a path of achieving things. And I could feel myself starting to apply all of that drive to parenting. When my son was very little, I remember very clearly he was in his sitting on the floor in little baby boppy, holding him up and playing with these toys, and he was supposed to be putting learning to put the color coordinated like a ball into a certain size hole, and the different sizes, and he kept putting like the blue ball in the green hole, and it didn't fit, and he couldn't quite figure it out. And he was a very smart little boy. But it was just a normal process of and I knew I was supposed to let him
learn.
discover this self
Yeah.
and learn. And I was watching it when I was like, oh, I just wanted to take his hand and guide it over, and just because I could feel it inside me. And actually, that's when I decided to start to write, because I had to put this sort of mechanism inside me towards something.
Yeah.
And I looked into many different things, volunteering and all different avenues of participating elsewhere and applying my skills elsewhere, so that I could just sit on the floor and let him do whatever he needed to do. And it was hard back then. There was no internet. I know I'm dating myself, but there was no internet. Maybe a little bit. We had maybe dial up AOL, but certainly nothing you could do for work. And there was no part-time work. There was no work from home, unless you were like making jewelry or something, or writing novels.
Right.
That was when the idea first came to me. Maybe a legal thriller. Like, I'm a lawyer, and John Grisham is a lawyer, and I love his books. And so actually the first attempt at a novel was a legal thriller. Yeah, so it's definitely been a process. And I think, now I'm at a stage where I think it's out of me a lot. A lot of it's out of me, that sort of drive to achieve. And uh so I just don't put any hurdles in front of me, because I might try to jump over them, but otherwise I'm pretty good.
Yeah, somebody said to me not too long ago, as I was talking about accomplishing things and wanting to accomplish X, Y, and Z, and they said, "Why don't you just enjoy the process and not focus on the outcome?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's what you say the people who are like lazy
Yeah,
and don't want to do stuff." And this person was like, "No, like Jen, slow down because your life, the process to what you want to accomplish, that's your life. Those are your days. And so you should spend your days doing something that you enjoy and enjoying that process to
yeah.
get to that outcome." But I was like, huh, kind of. So I think about it and I just want to thank your son for not getting the right ball in the right
I
thing.
know.
So
Yeah.
otherwise, it wouldn't have propelled you to this amazing career. Will you talk a little bit about the characters in Blade? It feels to me like a Venn diagram. It's your skating background and your legal backgrounds presented together in a book. So
Yeah.
will you introduce
Yeah.
us to this amazing cast of characters?
Yeah, for sure. So, this was probably the hardest book I've ever written because I didn't know how to craft a story in this world that didn't have pieces of my own because I didn't know any other way through skating than the one that I journeyed. And sometimes when you have lived something and it was so profound in your life, it's much harder to create like a different emotional world in your head for a different type of story. So I decided to lean into it and try to capture the emotions. And I gave the backstory to my character, Anna Robbins, who's a skater now. Just 14 years ago, I skated many more years ago than that. But 14 years ago, she was a skater at a place called the Palace, which is in Colorado, nestled in the mountains. It's a fictitious town called Echo, Colorado, and the training facility is called the Palace, which is there are many ice palaces around the world. So it's a pretty common name for an ice rink. So it's the Palace, and there's a dormitory there. And she, like I did, she lived there from age 13 to 16 without, away from home, away from her family, and with three other girls who were there at the same time, and they called themselves the Orphans. And so there's a backstory that follows Anna and the orphans for those 3 years. And then there's the forward story. So then now we find Anna, it's 14 years later, and she is a criminal defense attorney specializing in defendants who are children. And she has very specific defenses that she likes to use when others aren't available. And they revolve around child psychology and this idea that childhood trauma can create certain emotions and deficits and judgment that can lead a child to have behavior that leads to criminal activity or violence. So she has left skating behind. She's in her life in New York City. And as the novel progresses, you can see why she chose that profession. It's her way of giving protection to children in a way that was lacking when she was at the Palace. But now a young skater named Grace Montgomery, who's 15 years old, has been accused of killing the assistant coach at the Palace, Emile Dressier, and she is days away from being charged. She's giving a story that doesn't match the evidence that they've found. Everything is preliminary and new. It's not a legal thriller at all. And she happens to be the daughter of one of the orphans, one of Anna's best friends from that time. So Anna comes back to the Palace to try to discover what has happened to this coach and if Grace was involved and why Grace is refusing to tell the truth about what happened. And that forward story takes place in 3 days during a blizzard, a snowstorm. And I did that intentionally so that the place could be kind of isolated and abandoned. So like everybody's gone to shelter in their homes. So there's nobody at the rink, nobody on the roads. And so the place is almost like frozen in time from when she was there. So she's almost going back to a relic, and that is going to really, really bring all of these memories sort of out of her, out of hiding where they've been all this time. And so we follow Anna Robbins in the forward story. She's trying to find out what happened to Grace, but she starts to realize that this murder may have something to do with the secrets that she left buried there years ago. And in the backstory, we are seeing those secrets unfold day by day, month by month. It spans the 3 years that she was there, and the secrets start to be revealed through the backstory. So it's kind of a fun, like, toggling between these two points of view, these two time frames. I tried to keep the chapter short, tried to keep them sort of rolling like waves. So you learn one thing in one chapter and then it builds in the next chapter until you get to the end, and hopefully a surprise ending. So
It is. I didn't see it coming. I can tell you that. And I read a lot. So well done. And I thought it was interesting. You talk about the forward story and then the past. And what's interesting is one's 3 years and one's 3 days. So not only are you like going back and forth in time, but the span of time is
yes.
complete opposite ends as well. So how do you keep all of that straight
Oh
when
my
you're
gosh.
writing?
With a very, very, like, a lot of paper. So there's a lot of, I plot a lot. So I have like I call it my page of disclosures, which are all the factual things that have to be disclosed to the reader for the plot to make sense. And then I try to put them in order, and then I try to allocate so that it's not repetitive. So I try to allocate which chapters the reader will learn those things in. So if something is happening 14 years ago and the reader is reading about that in real time, I don't repeat the facts of that. There'll just be a reference to it. So they don't have to hear about it again, but now they can go inside Anna's head and experience how she remembers it, how she feels about it all these years later. Having the so a lot of back and forth, a lot of reading the draft and writing down, okay, what did I actually end up doing in each chapter, making sure everything tracks, trying to keep it tight, reading it, rereading it, my agent editing it, my editors doing the same, and really a lot of massaging to keep it moving and but to also let the reader be in the moments long enough for it to have an emotional impact. And the fun thing about having the front story, the forward story be over just a short period of time is that the things that are happening, a lot of the things that are happening are inside Anna's head. So just the piecing together what she's learning and the past and how she feels about it, and and how the other orphans feel about it, is it's not as much sort of action that she's doing a lot of things. She does drive through town and speak to people and all of that, but it's really like the processing of what she's learning with what happened in the past.
Yeah, I think that's the one of the many gifts that you all as writers give us, being able to see inside that character's head and their thought process. And what's interesting is what happened in the past. And, you come back to a place that you haven't been to in years. And it's amazing. Like those memories just immediately come flooding back when you think about who you were with during that time period and you see a certain thing or you hear a particular piece of music, that type of thing, and how she chose to go away from it. And then some of the orphans chose to stay,
Yes.
in that environment.
Yeah. So what's most perplexing to her is that her Jolene, who was the oldest of the orphans, 14 years ago, her daughter is Grace Montgomery, who's accused of the murder. And Anna didn't know that. She has not stayed in touch and not followed skating at all. And so when she learns that Jolene sent her daughter to this place to be trained by the same coaches and live in the dormitory, she's kind of like, why would you do that after what happened to us? And Jolene, to her surprise, has a different recollection of it. She's kind of processed it more and in a different way. And we do that, right? People who come from the same family will have a different recollection of what their childhood was like, how they view their parents, how they view their siblings. So as we get older, our memories, and this is one of the things I've learned researching my books, memories are reconsolidated. So we are always updating our memories in a way that best suits us in the moment. And our brains do that for us. So memories are not static. And that's why people can remember the same event factually different, not just emotionally, but actually the facts being different because over time, our brains have changed them. So Anna goes back. So now she's talking to Jolene, who's there and can't understand how this happened to Grace, how Grace could have killed her coach. And Anna's like, what do you mean? Like this place like destroys children and you sent your child here. And she doesn't remember it that way. And then, yes, and there's other things that happen with the other two orphans that we learn about as well as the book goes on. But so lots of themes, lots of things, to ponder, I guess, from the story.
Right. I mean, there are lots of things that I learned in the course of reading this. I did not realize your um, discussion there about memories and how they're reconsolidated and they are fluid and not
Yes.
static. To me, that's fascinating because there's this whole psychological aspect to this book that it's not just skating and being able to do the flips and the turns and the choreography, but there's the whole sports psychology or what is supposed to be sports psychology there, working with the athletes to be able
Yes.
to get them to perform at an elite level, to not feel that pressure.
Yes.
So
Yeah, it's so one of the themes in the book is fear. So their coach, Dawn Sumner, we don't diagnose her, but she has a certain philosophy about how to get the best out of her skaters. She also, I would say, has some narcissism and other psychological disorders that make her lack empathy for these girls. So to her, they need to have absolute obedience to the program, but also to her, they have to crave her approval and affection. And that in her philosophy is that if they fear her more than they fear falling, they can help overcome the innate response of going into a new jump, which is to slow down, don't go as high. I mean, your brain is, when you're learning a new jump, you're going to fall. That's just how it goes. We go from a single to a double to a triple, and now a triple to a quad. When you're going to go from a double jump, let's say, to a triple. The first time you try it, you just hold your arms and legs and then try to, and you haven't learned yet exactly the split second when you should release and land. It's not like pirouettes where you're spotting and you're counting turns. You're spinning so fast in the air that it just becomes a feel that your body gets accustomed to, but it only does that by trial and error, by falling. So you just go up, and instead of coming out on the landing in a double, you make your body hold until you hit the ice. And sometimes you'll hit the ice and you'll be able to release into a landing really quickly, or you'll stumble out of it, but sometimes you crash. And
and it's
so,
not a soft surface that you're crashing
no, it's
into.
really painful. I mean, and sometimes you tend to fall the same way over and over, and you'll get into this pattern of falling the exact same way. So you fall on the exact same body part. But anyway, that fear, that just is part of skating. And so I remember, like, I have vivid memories of going around when I was not in a lesson, but when I was practicing and trying to learn a triple. I was not a good jumper, which is why I started to realize I wasn't going to make it in the sport. But when I was starting to learn triples, I would be skating around the rink, building speed, and I would start making bargains with myself. Like, if you don't slow down this time and just really go for it, you can eat a whole thing of ice cream, or you can stay up late and watch, Dallas or whatever was on at the time. Like, you can do something you're not supposed to do. And I would try to trick my brain and like bribe myself, because it would just do it. I would go for the takeoff, and I could feel my edge like just pressing harder into the ice to try to slow me down and keep me grounded, and I wouldn't get the height and I wouldn't make the rotations, and I would fall anyway. And that's, so it was, or I would chicken out and pop the jump and not even go for the rotation. So anyway, the book goes into a little bit of this with Dawn, mostly because it's a way that Dawn uses to kind of be abusive to these girls, is the psychological attachments that she makes them form with her. And the reasoning behind it ostensibly is to help them overcome the fear of learning these jumps. And there's another part of fear that's in all sports, which is performance anxiety. And that's a different kind of fear. That's sort of the freeze, response as well, but it's for a different reason. It's a more existential reason of people are watching and scoring, and this is the only moment that counts. And oh my God, if I don't land my jumps and I won't make the podium and my entire life's work will be for nothing. I mean, it's not an immediate fear of hurting yourself. It's a fear of losing something that's more existential, which is, your dream. So that fear is, I think there's sports psychology has advanced so much, but there are many techniques to keep yourself grounded, because what happens is when the adrenaline comes in, it disrupts the connection between mind and body. So some sports, actually, adrenaline is good. It can make you faster, more aggressive.
Right.
It definitely, and anything that requires a split second mind, body, muscle memory, we call it, right? Anything that interrupts that is going to possibly, cause you to fall or make an error in whatever sport it is. And so that is a different kind of fear that you can actually really control with mindfulness and things like that. But it goes into the psychology of fear a little bit in the book, which was another fun little rabbit hole to go down.
Oh, absolutely. And she's written, the coach Dawn has written a book about
Yes, she's
how
book
to
about,
train champions,
yeah,
using these techniques.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. And I also learned too, that depending on where your jumps are in your routine, if they're later in the routine when you would be tired, they get scored higher. No idea until
Yes.
I read Blade.
Yeah. So now, like, the scoring has changed so much. And that I had to do some research into the new, how the scoring has changed and where it was 14 years ago, because I was not skating 14 years ago. So yes, you get more points if you do any jump after the halfway point in the program. And that's because your legs are tired, right? So you've been jumping and spinning and stroking around and, for 2 minutes or, whatever it is. And then if you can perform the harder jumps at the end of your program, you get a higher base value is awarded for that jump. So it was that way when I was skating as well. We didn't have the rigidity that we have now with the scoring, but it was taken into account by the judges in the technical score. We had an artistic score and a technical score, and the technical score would be impacted if you could do, one of your harder jumps at the end of the program. And then it got more formal when the rules changed to give each jump a certain specific base value, and then to give, more points for a specific jump after the halfway point.
I learned more about skating. I mean, I've watched it. It was my grandma's favorite thing to watch. But like knowing that you're coming down on such a small fraction, ergo blade, and it's
Yes.
blind. You don't see it. Like it just makes me appreciate what you did and what, the athletes do today, just how incredibly difficult it is. I
Yes.
mean, just skating in general is difficult, let alone deciding that you're going to spin around several times up in the air, come back down, not see where you're landing. It's just, as you say, your body feels when it's supposed to release to land.
It's
And
Yep. And you can see when a skater, like if you listen to the commentators, who were skaters, you can tell on the takeoff if there's a certain arc that a jump has to make, for a smooth landing. You can muscle your way into a landing, if you're lopsided or slightly off the axis that you need to be on. But there's like it's physics, actually.
I was just going to say, it sounds like
Yeah.
physics, right?
It's all physics and the sort of the position you need to be in the air, because when you land, you're landing on sort of a curve. So if you were to go down and look at the markings on the ice, the landing, you'd see a little mark where the toe pick lands, and then it goes right back to an outside edge. Usually on the right skate, most skaters rotate counterclockwise. So you'd come down, there's a little pick mark, and then it would be an arc though. It wouldn't be like a straight line. And so if you're not spinning on the right axis when you come down, that's the way you need to land, and you can mess up and fall,
Good.
stump. Yeah.
We need to watch the Olympics
I
together.
know, right?
One,
Yeah.
like, yeah, one. I just need to hear your perspective on it. I think that would be just
Yeah. Okay, well,
amazing.
yeah, I'm gonna definitely be watching, so I'm sure I'll be posting some stuff about jumps.
Yeah,
Actually, I filmed something just trying to explain the difference between some of the triples, which, and why they have
names.
different names with different base values for each one, so
I've got some homework to do
fun
then
stuff if,
before.
if you're watching it. Yeah, it's fun to know what you're watching when you're watching a sport.
Well, I row, so I'm on a crew team, and somebody on my crew team is a curler, like,
Wow.
recreationally, but pretty good. So she had a friends and family, and she's like, "Come try." And so it was a Friday night, and we all went, and I was like, "Holy cow, this is so difficult." Like, you see it from a different perspective because 'cause you're on the ice, and the ice isn't smooth in curling,
Yeah.
it's bumpy. So you learn all these things and how coordinated you have to be. So now I am totally invested in watching curling in the Winter Olympics because I know
Yeah.
more, right? And the more you
Yeah.
know, the more you appreciate. So same thing with you and skating.
Yes. It's fun.
Talking Yeah, you talked a little bit about Anna Robbins, right? Main character and kind of why she went into the field she did after her time at the palace. And she talks a little bit about working with kids and children who commit crimes, that young lives hobbled before they could begin. There's always a reason: abuse, misuse, or neglect. And I just thought, "Well, you're doing this, and it's also when you're coming of age, when you're like the most impressionable."
Yes.
And just kind of gobsmacked with how people behave or how people were treated and the implications that has on their life moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the one of the central themes of the book is connecting past with present. And I think we talk about that a lot, that our past can inform our future selves. But this goes into the reasons why. And another one of my books did a deep dive into this, but it's one of the most fascinating things I learned when I was an attorney. I was a family law attorney for a number of years before I was writing full time. And I was trained to be a guardian ad litem, which is an advocate for children in high conflict custody cases. And the psychology that I started to learn there and then really learned a lot more about when I started writing psychological thrillers is about this sort of formation of the human brain from the moment of birth, because that's when we can start observing children. But many people believe it starts even in the womb when as the brain starts to experience things in its environment. And the most damage can be done in the first 3 years of life, and it can be irrevocable. There are certain stages at, in a child's life when certain wiring is happening, when the brain is receptive to learning certain things about the environment that you're presumably going to be living in for your life, and it makes accommodations for that. So if a child is neglected, abused, misused, and any bumps in the road, even bumps that are completely unintentional, if there's a death in the family, a sibling or a parent, and that impacts how they are cared for and the emotional connections they're able to form in those early years, it can have a lasting effect on that person. So this is really examining the impact on Anna and the other orphans when they were at the palace, and how it stayed with them throughout their lives. And I think for me, this was the only way I could tell the story, because that's how I experienced the sport. And that was how I came to sort of get my arms around the impact that it had on me. And like I was saying before, when a story is this close to you, you can change the facts and make it factually fictional, but it's very hard to deviate from the themes that came out of your own experience. It's at least for me, and I've written I mean, there are parts of me in all of my books, but uh, yeah, I'm usually pretty good at just, oh, okay, we're going to be in this small town here and this woman is kidnapped and, this is going to
Can't see
happen.
apples the same way, though, after reading
Exactly. And
that
I
book.
put myself in her shoes or a cop who stumbles on a shooting in a department store. And I've never
Mhm.
done that, whatever. I've never been in that situation. And so it's new to me. And so I try to imagine what that would be like. And then do research. I talk to cops and piece together what this character, what it could be like. So, but when it's with this subject matter, this was the direction the book had to take.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna
And
say I didn't have to do much. I I'm not diminishing research because it was authentically what you lived, but I have to imagine that it was challenging, maybe hopefully a little bit cathartic in writing it.
yeah, the most interesting thing about it was that when I started pulling memories from those years, and that was sort of how we started. My agent said, just write down everything that happened and just get it all out, everything that happened, and then let's see what kind of fictional story we can mold from, some of the themes. Going into all of that, it was all dark stuff, and then when I was writing it, I realized, well, there has to be a reason why these girls are doing this, why they want to spend their childhood like training to be skaters. There must be something that they found joyful about it. And I really had to dig back into my memories to pull out the joyful pieces, what it felt like when I don't even remember when I didn't know how to skate. I don't remember stumbling, falling, feeling like I couldn't do it. All I remember about skating is being able to fly and feeling my body taking shape, making shapes that you cannot make on the ground because of physics. Because when you're in motion like that, and it has a gravity takes on a different form when you have speed, and so you can glide on a blade at an angle and not fall over. If you tried to stand that way, you'd fall over. So it's just physics, and but the feeling of it is just incredible. To be able to move like that is really something special. And it's unlike anything else. Like skiing, you're moving, but you're kind of confined to certain movements. I mean, there's freestyle skiing, all of that, but this is your whole body is free to make shapes, to be expressive. And that's why I love the artistry of skating. When you see a skater who just is is really at one with the music, and just that it's like a dance on the ice. Even in the singles, skating. And it's just to be able to do that is really joyful. So that was really surprising and somewhat cathartic, I think, was to rediscover that part of it.
I was just gonna say that. I mean, watching your whole face, because we're on a
Yeah.
podcast, but your whole face lighting up when you're
Yeah.
talking about that and freeing and being able to fly on the ice, that so glad that you were able to find that joy again,
Thanks.
which is why you loved it in the first place. But I mean, how often you were an elite skater and you go to training, but you don't see what that's like until you're there. So like why people would do it. Well, because you see Peggy Fleming and Dorothy Hamill and Christy Yamaguchi, like that whole, like I'm of that era, right? Where you see them, but you don't realize all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
you give a really interesting glimpse into it. And I'll just like talk about Dawn's approach and fear training,
Yeah.
like to build these robots, and then says, girls are not machines. Their bodies get hurt, their brains long for things that have nothing to do with skating. There was no one there to help them with any of that.
Yeah.
And I just think, wow. I mean, they're kids, young. You were young, formidable
Yeah.
years, and then you have the adults who are already formed, not coming
Yes.
of age and making these decisions
Yeah.
that could have and have had catastrophic impact. So the
Yeah.
tension
It's
that exists, yeah.
for sure. I mean, it was And I've loved getting messages from skaters on social media, who were at the same dorm like after I was, and one woman wrote and told me that she's like, "Oh yeah, I got kicked out of that dorm for, sneaking out the window or whatever." I'm like, "Oh my God, me too." And it's just so that the part about the book I think that's really maybe surprising to people is that a lot of times we see stories about athletes and they're so disciplined and they go to school, they go to the rink, or they don't go to school anymore. They just go to the rink and they try to be like machines. They don't eat anything that's bad for them. They don't, stay up late. They don't drink. They don't ever smoke or vape or anything. Like they don't do anything that, a lot of teenagers at least try once or twice or whatever. That's sort of the depiction, and it's just not real. I mean, when I was the flip side of the skating was there was a whole party scene going on. There was one house in particular where some of the older male skaters would lived, and in her basement, I think she had like 3 bedrooms in the basement, and they had parties down there all the time. We'd play quarters. People were throwing up in the bathroom. I mean, these are teenagers who, there's so much pressure and the desire, the like need to just
Let it
escape
go.
that is
Yeah.
just it's human, and it some had better I don't want to say necessarily control, but some had less of a need to escape than others, and I think part of that again goes to the life that they are given outside of the rink with their families. So, watching TV with siblings or with parents and having fun downtime with their families that was not anything about skating. Even a family dinner where you're just talking about other stuff where they're being praised for other things and acknowledged for other things that they're doing, even if it's just something kind that they did for their sister or brother or anything like that.
Right.
All that is missing. So if you take all of that out, and now what is replacing that?
Well, yeah, nature abhors the vacuum, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
This was a fascinating book. I mean, the psychological, background, the mystery itself to figure out the glimpse, behind the scenes in terms of the skating world. The other thing that Anna talks about, which we kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, but she talks about like people going back to the scene, where trauma happened, and is it cathartic? Sometimes it just creates a fresh new wound. And I thought, because so many times you hear that, well, you got to go back and rewrite the narrative and it'll be
Yeah.
cathartic if you go back. Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Yeah. I mean, I think, again, because our memories do change and they change to protect us. Like that is our brain's job, is to keep us safe and to keep us happy. And so a lot of what happens inside of our brain chemistry is happening without our knowing it. And this science is, I love that it's out really. So many books have been, like The Body Keeps the Score has been on the bestseller list
Absolutely.
for like, I don't even know how many years, but it's true. Like we have an emotional brain, part of the brain, the amygdala, and it is making decisions
Split second. Yeah.
on its own, like based on how you feel. So if there's something you remember in the past that's painful, you may change that memory over time to make it a version of it that's less painful, or you might have with it a lot of red flags, and so that you don't dwell on it or pull it out at all. So it's really, diving back into the source of trauma is really like it should be done with guidance and
And hopefully that was the case for you writing this book, going back to this time in your life where you were completely identified as a skater and what you accomplished as a skater. But there's so many more awesome things about you, and so glad that you have found those and discovered those. And I think it's your story, I think, has a happy ending. So
yes, it does. And that's really kind of the message in it too, is that there's a whole life out there. And, for me, the most grounding thing is with my kids and with my really close friends who you know, don't care that I was a skater. My kids forget sometimes about it. And they, even being a writer, book launch coming and you want it to be successful and then, my kids, they'll probably forget about it if I don't remind them, like they're just
Yeah.
looking for mom and realizing that, there are these people out in the world who value you for just where the place you hold for them in this life and what you mean to them and the guidance you give and the friendship or the parenting, the love that you give them has nothing to do with any of your accomplishments. And at the end of the day, that is like that vacuum we talked about. That's
Mhm.
what filled it for me more than any of the accomplishments that I've had. What filled that void for me was really creating my little tribe of people that I walk through my life with.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I don't think we're going to be able to say anything better than that today, but I think that's been the biggest gift, I think, is getting to know you all as writers, but as I said at the beginning, like you as people. Like it's fun. Like, I like sometimes forget, like, wait a second, I'm talking to Wendy Walker, like best-selling writer. Because I just see you as Wendy and people are like, "Oh my God, you know her?" And I was like, "Yeah, like great person, funny, kind, smart."
Aw,
So
thank
yeah,
you.
so it's been fun, and I'm so glad that you have such an amazing life and have thoughtfully curated it so that it reinforces all the things that you are.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a journey, as they
It
say.
has been a journey. So as we wrap up, this is Stories End. Final 5 questions. Best piece of advice you've ever received.
Probably to quit skating.
Would you rather be embarrassed or afraid?
I guess I'd rather be embarrassed.
Okay. What's a show that you have binge watched that you think everybody should binge watch?
Well, I don't know about everybody, but I just binge watched Heated Rivalry.
There you go. Hockey. There we go.
Totally binged it.
With the Winter Olympics starting soon, who are you looking forward to watching in figure skating?
Oh, I would say the women, our three leading ladies who are just going to be absolutely amazing to watch. Alyssa Liu, Amber Glenn, and Isabeau Lovato. They're beautiful, amazing skaters, and so I think we have a chance for
I've
some
heard this is
medals.
like the best that the US has looked in a long time.
Yeah, well, and in
So
the
this
men's
is exciting.
division, Liam Malinan, who can
Quad
land
God.
at the quad god, he can land a quad axle, and even when he has a bad day, his base level points are so high that no one can really touch him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's going to be fun. Like I'm now even more committed to watching after reading.
yeah, it's gonna be great.
It is going to be great. What song would you always include on a road trip playlist?
Oh my gosh, I guess I'd have to say "American Girl," one of my favorite songs, and I actually titled a book after it.
Yes. And every time I hear it, I think of
Yes,
you because of that. It started as an audible, right? And I
it
still hear
did.
the cadence of the toppings, just so you know.
Yes, yes.
So well
Lettuce,
done.
tomatoes.
So, for those of you listening, huge thank you. And to Wendy, I always enjoy talking to you, and especially today about Blade, which just published this week. I'm sure readers will be watching the Olympics with a completely different perspective and appreciate the incredible skill, talent, and beauty, and then thinking about you doing many of those things those athletes have performed on the ice. To find out who else is going to be a guest, go to storytocount.com. It's a Story to Count with Jen Jumba. Thank you so much.
Thank you.